I'm Alcuin Gersh.
And welcome to Gen Con 2018.
Yay!
We have with us some folks from one of my very, very favorite publishers, Pelgrane Press. Would y'all like to introduce yourselves?
So my name's Kat Tobin. I'm the managing director and co-owner of Pelgrane Press.
And I'm Simon Rogers, director and co-owner of Pelgrane Press.
Welcome, guys.
Thank
Welcome.
you. Thank you for having us.
Oh, you're welcome. How have you been enjoying your Gen Con?
It's been going really well. I mean, we're based in the UK. Well, Simon's based in the UK. I'm based in Ireland. So it's always really great for us to come over to the US and meet up with colleagues and customers and just be able to kind of chat to people in person about our games, because I think we often kind of work in isolation. So being around a big group of people who are all as enthused and excited about role-playing as we are is always a really fantastic opportunity for us.
Yeah.
So,
So I've been coming to Gen Con for, well, probably nearly 20 years. So it's just amazing to see how the community has changed and grown and diversified over the years, particularly in the last few years. We're really excited about that.
Yeah, this is actually my first Gen Con.
Me too.
Wow, really?
Yeah,
Oh
we're
gosh.
newbies.
So yeah, I'm not newbies to tabletop gaming, but to Indianapolis. It's very exciting. So for someone who is new, what is like the thing to do at Gen Con? Like,
I would always recommend making a plan. I would recommend sitting down with a schedule, looking for the things that really appeal to you in terms of gaming. So whether that's board gaming or card gaming or tabletop role-playing, LARPing, panels, seminars, there's a world of different events going on for each different aspect of gaming. So I would grab the schedule, sit down with it, and really go through it and drill down deep into the areas that are really interesting to you, because there's such a wealth of stuff out there for you.
there's so much.
Yeah. And a lot of stuff you have to get tickets for quite early.
Yeah.
They sell out. But you can also buy these generic tickets.
Exactly, yeah. So you can just rock up
You
to
heard about
anything.
those?
Yeah, where it's just sort of like a across the board ticket that you
Yeah,
can use.
because people don't show up for their things, and you can just sort of hang out and be like, oh, okay, well, these people didn't show, so the people wait in line, and they say, oh, I've got these many generics, and you kind of get in, and
Yeah,
so the rooms stay full.
really been our experience, because we run a lot of tabletop games here, and we're always looking for GMs. So I'm just going to throw that out there. If anyone's ever interested in GMing for us, please do get in touch. But we run a lot of games,
We are.
and all of our
please.
games are always sold out. So people go, oh, I really wanted to play some of your games, but they're entirely sold out. And I say to people every time, just rock up to the start of the slot with a couple of generics, because there's always somebody who can't make it, particularly in the mornings or maybe later on in the evenings.
Yeah.
So it's always worth just turning up to games that you're really interested in with generics, even if they're sold out.
8 a.m. Sunday, you can have your pick of any game you want.
Yeah, nobody wants to play at 8 a.m. on Sunday.
That's true. I feel like that's a sign up weeks in advance. Where you're
Yeah.
like, I can do it.
Yeah.
I'll be
And
awake
do all
till
the
all
things.
of Gen
Exactly.
Con.
I'm definitely not going out on Saturday night partying. No, siree.
And
That
if I do, I'll be fine with 2 hours.
exactly. Yeah.
If you just want to try out games, if you're not quite so organised, then something like Games on Demand or Contessa or going around to the various stands that do 15-minute demos like Atlas, you'll get to play a really cool card game, get an idea of what the game is, and spend $15 and off you go.
Yeah.
So that's another option.
So that's great. So
Let's get to the meat of this goodness.
yeah. I'm actually gonna let Hillfolk talk to you first, because I'm trying not to fangirl out.
Oh yeah, don't freak out.
Here. It's just so exciting.
I like this stuff too. Maybe I'm just better at hiding it.
Why hide it?
Yeah,
Why
let it
hide
out.
joy?
Exactly.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
I'm just going to
Yeah.
be irrepressibly effusive about all these goodies. So tell us about Pelgrane Press, and like kind of what is it that makes Pelgrane Press special, and what are your games about?
So I think personally, one of the things that makes us really special is that we're really subject matter experts on role-playing games. So we don't make card games or board games or video games. We don't make any kind of games except role-playing games. So that's what all of us in the company are really passionate about, really enthusiastic about. And I think that comes across in the quality of our games. We make role-playing games for role players, for people who love this hobby as much as we do. So I think that's kind of our USP. I think that's where we're at in terms of we know role playing, and we make games that demonstrate that knowledge and also that appeal to a wide variety of people. So I mentioned earlier when we were kind of running through the setup, we kind of do 3 different types of role playing games. So we've got some examples here. So the first one is, and I think we're maybe going to talk more about Hillfolk later on. You can see the preemptive fangirling already. So we've kind of got our more storytelling side, which are more independent, short-run, standalone games that you can literally, they're designed to be picked up and played straight from the book. So there's no prep, just grab some friends, sit down. And they tend to be written by a variety of diverse authors. And as well as that, they're shorter and they're easier to get into. Often they're about more challenging subjects as well. So like our game collection, #Feminism, deals with a lot of contemporary feminist issues. And our Seven Wonders collection is more traditional, but also a lot of spins and twists on traditional archetypes. As well as that, we've got our Gumshoe system, which is our kind of main core line.
Yeah.
So Gumshoe is designed for investigative horror role-playing. So instead of...
It's such a specific genre.
It really is.
You know,
I know exactly what you're talking
really
about.
specific. Yeah. It's really, really specific, but it's tuned to do exactly that thing and do it really, really well.
It really
So,
does.
yeah. So the idea behind it is that if you're an expert in something, if you're really great at architecture, if you look at a building, you'll just know about it, right? You shouldn't
Yeah.
be able to fail a role to know about architecture if you're an architect,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the idea behind Gumshoe is that you always get the information from the adventure that your character would know based on their investigative skill set. So it's really designed for any kind of investigation, any kind of mystery you want to play, whether it's a haunted house or maybe a time travel investigative adventure. You can run any sort of mystery with the Gumshoe system. And then our third one is one of our biggest game lines, which is 13th Age. So that's our D20 fantasy game. And it was written by Rob Hainsou and Jonathan Tweed.
Who wrote the previous two versions of D&D.
Yeah.
And this is the game that they made for themselves to play.
It's their homebrew
without
system.
any creative constraints from the publisher. No, because publishers will always say, oh, you need to change this, you need to change that. They were like, no, we want to play this game. They've looked at story games and written story games. And so what they've got is the core, super fun D20 flowing fantasy game, but on top of that, they have things that allow players to bring story.
Yeah.
So, for example, every character has one unique thing that makes them unique in the entire world. So you're already a hero before you start out. So it might be you were born from a dragon's egg, or you won the Dwarf King's belching competition, or you're
Like you do.
You've done all
As
these
you do.
things.
or you
I have so many unique things.
or your shadow is hunting you down. So that gives the GM, they've already made up a whole bunch of stuff
Yeah.
before the game starts for the GM to make use of.
Yeah.
And the game features these 13 icons who are immensely powerful NPCs who have influence. And every single character has a relationship with the icons, so it could be positive or negative. So if you're a paladin, you might have a negative relationship with the Lich King
Yeah.
because you've been fighting his undead minions for years and years and years.
I
And
can see that. I can see that.
and that kind of informs what your character is like. And the other element that's really a story game element is your backgrounds aren't things like Acrobat +2. Mm-hmm. It will be Drackenhall circus performer, or secret festival goer,
Yeah.
or lived in a hole for 2 years, or whatever you want, and then you get a little bonus for that. And it's just a really fun, exuberant D20 fantasy experience.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, when you're playing D&D and you have like a good DM, they will do that thing where they get into your background and they find things and they sort of do a homebrew of like, well, you'd probably so make that work, but it's great to have games that actually have it in the mechanics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So regardless of your experience level, you're still having a similar like experience as a player.
Yeah, that's a thing I think that people often say to us is that, oh yeah, like really experienced GMs kind of look at our games and they go, oh yeah, I'm already doing that kind of thing in my home game.
Yeah.
But what we're saying is we're putting these elements into the game for everyone to be able to access. Yeah.
And you mentioned complexity. At the table, you find that different players want different amounts of crunch.
Yeah.
So some people, they're not that interested in the combat. They just want to do something simple. So while all the character classes are balanced, they are actually organised to how complex they are. So if you want to play a super crunchy character where you can use this feat and this talent and combine them all together, you'd play, say, the wizard or the fighter. But if you just want to do something simple, you play the paladin or or the barbarian, and you'll only have that much stuff on your character sheet.
Oh, the paladin is simple in 13.
And combat is already really quick as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
The escalation die.
Yeah.
You have a giant d6 in the middle of the table. Every round it goes up one, and all the players get to add that onto their die roll.
Oh, wow.
So at the
Oh, wow.
beginning, the monsters are more powerful than you, and you're being beaten down. But as the die goes up, you're better and better. And there are certain things that trigger off the escalation die, like dragons are allowed to use the escalation die, as you might expect. But say you get to a 3, that means the monk can do a super flurry attack.
Yeah.
And so interesting and fun things happen as the escalation die goes up.
So that's a very interesting mechanic where the situation changes your skill set. That's really cool.
yeah, but it
Yeah.
also makes it means that you don't get bogged down in combat, because I think everyone's had those experiences, you know, kind of back in the day with older games where you're just sitting there going around the table for an hour just trying to get through one round of combat. So it
It's
really
like a run of
it really
resources,
speeds that out.
you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to get way more into role playing than the combat, and I've had issues with GMs before where it was a campaign on rails, and it was all combat every game, and he had this one of my GMs had this very complicated setup where he came and he's like set up 25 different figurines, did the whole thing, and he's like, you guys run into an army, and my friend and I basically went over and we basically did a deception where I pretended to be his commander back at his fort. And it was like, the base is on fire! and through a series of spells, the general believed me, and the GM rolled very poorly and just very angrily wiped all of his figurines from the board. And it was like, the army retreats. And I was like, let's go talk to people.
That's when you pick up everything, hide it under the table, and then somehow you randomly run into another army.
Yes,
Oh.
exactly. Picking it up, putting
Here
it
they
back
are.
out
Here's what we
there.
made earlier.
It's all different people. They're different. It's a different army. So many armies out here in the West.
So that sounds like some interesting new mechanics overlaid onto a more traditional system.
Exactly, yeah.
But tell us about some of the things you do, like hashtag Feminism or Hillfolk, or these ones that are kind of broadening the audience and bringing in a more diverse audience and kind of expanding what a role-playing game can address.
Yeah, really, really happy to. I could talk about Hillfolk and Seven Wonders and hashtag Feminism literally for the rest of the day,
Okay.
very
I
easily.
could
I don't have anything else.
I still have hours and hours of things to say. I'm so passionate about these games. So I'll start off with Hillfolk because that was really our first kind of foray into story games proper. And Hillfolk uses what we call the drama system, and that's essentially designed to emulate something like a HBO show. So if you think of something like The Sopranos, sure, you know, there's kind of combat in it, but most of the focus of the drama is on the relationships between the characters, and that's what drama system is about.
Yeah.
So instead of it being the GM saying, right, and here's this army that I've prepared, and now you're going to interact with my story, the GM is more a facilitator who's there to allow the stories between the players to come to the fore. And the drama system uses a really clever character creation mechanic where you define a relationship with each of the other characters.
It's so fun.
And you also...
It's so fun. It's like you know the whole story before you go into the
Exactly,
game.
and
it's
you
like
also
you're building
define a
together.
thing that you want from that character, right? So, like, I might want respect from your character. All I want is for you to look at me and say, yes, you are someone that I admire and respect.
Do you know anybody like that?
And then you come up with a reason as to why you can't give me respect.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm too young or I'm unproven. And then we
So
set up
clever.
this...
I just have to say, like, the fact that it's not just what you want from a character, but why that character
Why
can't
they can't
give
give it to
you.
you.
Yeah.
So you're already explaining what the character needs to do in play to overcome that resistance or that reluctance, right? And so the thing about it is that it's then broken up into scenes, right? So all of the players get to call a scene. They get to say, I'd like to have a scene with your character. And I'd like to kind of really explore this aspect of our relationship. And so the system encourages you to do a thing called making a petition, right? So I would petition your character somehow, just through normal play.
Yeah.
And try and, if I was trying to win your respect, I would try and win your respect. If I was trying to get you to fall in love with me, you know, I might present myself in a way that makes me more attractive to what I know you're into.
Okay.
So you set up the scenes to define what you want your character to get from the other characters. And the GM is there then to facilitate all of that, but also every now and again to kind of go, you know, I'd really like to see the relationship between you two. I feel like there's animosity here that we're not getting into. You know, let's drill down into that.
I love how much of this is not just collaborative, but like all of the hooks and also so much of it is very player driven.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. It's all of our games are really player focused. They all give the power to define the story and drive the plot in the hands of the players, in the Gumshoe system and all of our story games as well.
But the extraordinarily clever thing about Hillfolk, the sheer simplicity of the mechanic that you never would have thought of, which is that when someone comes to you to petition you for something, that your natural reaction is to refuse, which you kind of should do. So, to start with, you don't get what you want in an HBO series in the first episode. But if you do that, you have to pass them a token, a drama token. And that's ammunition to get other stuff done later. You can jump into people's scenes. You can kind of force a concession. So the respect, you can get some respect from them. It doesn't have to last. But if you've gathered enough rejections, you can then pay for a bit of respect later on. And it's just so simple. That's almost all there is to the mechanics once you set up the character diagrams and relationships. But it's just a little piece of genius.
Yeah, and it's basically the folks that don't get what they want get the drama token.
Yeah, exactly.
So
So if you're not getting what you want repeatedly in scenes, the system then empowers you to start forcing people to give you what you want.
You can even say no to a scene, right?
Yeah.
If someone calls a scene and says, I want to have a scene with Elquin where we hash out this thing, if you have enough drama tokens, you can say no.
I refuse.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm
And
avoiding
you can
you.
counter with their drama tokens.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Then
exactly.
it becomes like a bidding war of who spins all their, like, who finds it the most important.
Yeah, exactly.
This is 6 drama tokens worth of no.
Exactly, but it really empowers the players to go, no, this one scene is what's really important to my character. So I really want to go all in with my drama tokens on this. I really want to have this scene kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So there are also what is the setting like for Hillfolk? What is
So that is a great question. That's a really great question. So the core setting, the name of the game is Hillfolk, and that's because the core setting is the 10th century Levant. So you play a hill tribe, so you've got your chieftain, you've got your up-and-coming young Turk who's trying to overthrow the chieftain, you've maybe got the chieftain's wife, you've got like the beautiful young woman who all of the men are trying to marry. So it's a very tribal kind of base system. But the Hillfolk book, I didn't bring it with me, which I'm really regretting now. The Hillfolk book is about that size, right? And the first maybe quarter or fifth of the book is all of the rules. And then the rest are what we call series pitches. So a series pitch is exactly what it sounds. It's a pitch for a series of Hillfolk using the drama system. And the series pitches range from, there's a Watership Down one, there's science fiction ones, there's modern day ones, there's 1970s Moscow in, a spy station. There's a day at the races where you play kind of, women in the polo set in their high heels with their young men kind of.
There's one where you can play ants, and there's a zombie outbreak in the anthill. And
Oh,
it's your ants.
cordyceps fungus thing or something?
Yeah. So your ants fighting zombie ants.
Oh.
So the setting is literally wherever, whenever, and whatever you want it to be. Because the system gives you a way of interacting between all of the characters, and you can do that anywhere. Anything you can think of a TV show about, right? And a TV show can be about anything. A Hillfolk drama system game can be about.
And just because we can't put in real TV shows doesn't mean you can't literally choose any Netflix show, whatever you want, and basically play it.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. You can do whatever you want in the privacy of your own home.
We won't talk. We won't talk.
We won't tell you.
TMI.
I do wonder, how long did it take y'all to compile all of the series pitches? I mean, was it, because they're so good, and like,
It was one of those things where we did a Kickstarter, and we'd written the little tiny drama system Hillfolk book, and we like to have our Kickstarters basically written before we start the core of it.
Yeah.
And then every single time we hit a stretch goal, we had to add another series pitch, so more and more and more of them.
Just kept hitting stretch goals.
But what's great about the series pitches is that they are very approachable. If you're a good writer, you don't need to learn any mechanics to write a series pitch.
Yeah.
It's like 2,500 words. And so it was pretty easy for us to find a huge array of people, all of whom had something in mind that they really wanted to do, and write to 2,500 words, and keep the rights. If they want to pitch their series to HBO, they can.
Yeah.
That's very cool that you let them keep the intellectual
the
property
rights,
rights for
yeah.
that.
Amazing. Yeah. They can just record people playing the game and be like, here's the show. It's
Yeah.
Proof of concept.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I could talk about Hillfolk all day, but you have other games, so
We
we
do.
should probably
That is
talk
true.
about them too.
Yeah, which one do you want to talk about next?
So exciting.
Well, I would like to briefly touch on #feminism because I feel like it leads out from that, and keeping it in the same kind of story games feel. So #feminism isn't a game that we produced. It's actually a game that we've picked up from another collective. So basically there's a Danish tabletop role-playing convention called Festival, and there's an awful lot of really fantastic writers who are based there. But there weren't very many women writers there. And a journalist called Lizzie Stark decided to go and change that. So she commissioned 34, as it turned out, feminist nano games. So when we say nano games, what we mean is they're kind of somewhere in the space between role-playing and LARP. So they're quite free-form tabletop role-playing games, I would say. And they all run from between quarter of an hour to an hour in length. So they're all super short. And they deal with contemporary feminist themes. They're ranged by a really cute system called the intensity level, which is the teardrop system. So they're rated from 1 to 5 teardrops.
Yes.
So if you want to play like a super fun, silly game about selfies or something, that'll have a 1 teardrop rating.
Okay.
But if you're more interested in exploring heavier subjects, and some of the books kind of the games towards the end deal with things like military sexual trauma, like abortion, sexual assault. So there's really, really heavy-hitting topics in there. And they're rated on a 5 in terms of intensity. So you always know what kind of experience you're going to get. And we're really finding with #feminism that a lot of educators are picking it up. So kind of college professors are bringing it into their classes. And we're finding that people also are really experiencing feminism in a very different way through playing it, because I'm sure we all know that role-playing builds empathy and it develops social skills, but it's only when you live another person's life and live another person's experience that you really get a sense of what it's like for them. So I love having people come up to the booth, and people come back to the booth all the time having picked up feminism to tell us how it's gone for them, to tell us what they've done with it, to tell us about their experiences with it. So it's not just a collection of really great games. It's also like a lightning rod for putting positive change out into the world through role-playing, which is something I'm very passionate about.
I love seeing stuff that isn't just, it's expanding so that people don't think, 20 years from now, I'd like people to look at role-playing games and the hobby and not only have more people know about it, but not just assume it's a bunch of, juvenile power fantasies
That's exactly
that only
it.
really cater to people like me.
Yeah.
So,
Teenagers dressed as wizards in a basement.
Exactly, yeah. And I believe very strongly that role-playing is a medium, right?
Yeah.
It's a medium for storytelling, but it's an art form.
definitely.
Right? And I think that #feminism is one of the projects that certainly I've seen that's come closest to really demonstrating that it is an art form. It is an art experience. It can change you. It can educate you. It can leave a lasting, thoughtful impression on you in the way that art can.
That is absolutely true. I've played 2 or 3 of the games, one of which was hilarious. The replacing words in film titles with the word vulva.
Yeah, Dances with Vulvas,
Yeah.
The Lord of the Vulvas.
12 Angry Vulvas.
12 Angry Vulvas.
But they're quite...
Are we allowed to say vulva on Twix?
Yeah. Feel free.
It's just a body part.
It is just a body
that's-
part.
yeah,
That's exactly
that's
the
the point of
point,
the game.
right?
Yeah, you nailed it.
That's exactly it.
But Seven Wonders, again, I think this was Kat. I think you were looking at seminars and going, there's just not enough of what's going on here. So Kat went around and collected up women and non-binary people and created this incredible anthology. And there are 7 games in there, and I've played 6 of them. One of which is basically you're the kids from Narnia, but you're
Okay.
or wherever, file off serial number, and you're in your 40s and you're all in therapy. So one of you's a management accountant or whatever, and you build relationships a bit like you do in drama system, and then you're literally in a psychotherapy session. There's no rules at all. And that was an amazing experience. But Kat can speak more about Seven Wonders than me, I think.
Yeah, so again, it's just the variety of games in it is what is really interesting and inspiring to me about it. So as well as When the Dark is Gone that Simon was talking about, there's another game which is basically you play the crew of the first human ship to go through a black hole, right? But as you approach the event horizon, weird stuff starts happening to your ship. And you can play it in like a really gonzo comedy kind of way, or you can play it in a really kind of event horizon-y horror kind of, you're meeting past versions of yourself and dead colleagues, and, it can be really quite horrifying. So the breadth of this one game is really appealing to me. And ultimately, you as a crew collaboratively decide whether you go through the black hole at the end, and that's the end of the game. So you're just getting closer and closer. Yeah.
Yes, always yes.
Yeah.
No matter how much scary stuff is involved, always.
Gone through it yet? You don't know.
You don't know how bad it is. Another thing I like about these smaller games is, again, that's another thing that's really making it accessible to people who are not necessarily hardcore
Yes,
role
exactly.
players.
Yeah.
Or just busy people. If
Yeah, I
they
mean,
can't do a
it-
full campaign, Like
That's and talking about busy people, one of the we're a little bit older as a company, we're not kind of young anymore, and a lot of us have families and jobs outside of the industry, and it was proving to be really, really difficult for us to get a group together. And we hit on the idea.
It's
right?
always the hardest part.
It's always the
of
hardest
any
part, the
RPG stuff.
scheduling, right?
Yeah.
So
Assistant groups.
we hit on the idea of, because a lot of people often have one person in their house. We thought, well, what if you had a game for just one person? So like just a GM and one other person. So we've just launched Cthulhu Confidential, which is our Gumshoe 1-to-1 system.
so excited.
One GM, one player. So you can get a game together without all of the hassle of having to organize a group.
You play it on a date.
Or play it on a date. Yeah, exactly.
My husband's been trying to get me to play it. Like, he's trying to set a time. He's like, we have to go through this. And I'm like, it'll work.
Yeah. So it's really another, again, talking about diversity and bringing different voices into the industry. The original concept of it was a kind of a standard LA gumshoe, right? So, your Philip Marlowe-esque kind of, hats, cigarette, legs up at the desk,
I always
femme
picture
fatales
Patrick
coming
Stewart
in.
whenever that comes up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be so great. Now I'm picturing Patrick Stewart. I'm going to stop picturing Patrick Stewart now and get back
Just
to...
all take a minute to picture Patrick Stewart.
let's do
and
that.
have fun.
Yeah. So that was our original concept, and we were going to get Robin Laws, who's one of our main writers, to write it, and he was working on it, and something about it just wasn't working for us, and we kind of thought, this is another white dude, yet another white dude in a sea of white dudes. Let's give people the opportunity to play not a white dude. So the front cover of Cthulhu Confidential, I hope you can see, has our 3 protagonist characters, all of whom are in the book. So there's Langston Wright, who's a World War II vet, who's just come back from World War II, where he was a hero. He was fighting for his country against the Nazis. And he comes back into Washington in the 1940s, the home front, and Jim Crow. And he goes from being this hero fighting for his country to just fighting for his life in a system that's rigged really heavily against him. And Chris Spivey, the author, has just done incredibly well at the Ennies last night with Harlem Unbound, which is his Gumshoe and Call of Cthulhu Harlem setting, and he really knows his culture and his history, and he's brought all of that into this experience. So you can dial up or down the racism in the game as you as a player are comfortable with, but the racism is there.
Yeah.
It's a part of
It's a
playing
component
that
of your
character,
experience,
right?
yeah.
And similarly, Vivian Sinclair is a sassy New York journalist in the 1930s, again fighting against sexism as well as the horrors of the Cthulhu mythos, because life is never easy, right? And the sexism comes baked in there as well. She's a woman in a man's world fighting for her rights. And then we've also got Dex Raymond, who's the, again, your standard kind of 1940s Los Angeles detective. But each of them are investigators who are uncovering the the horrors of the Cthulhu mythos in this kind of noir landscape, alongside potentially some social issues.
That's amazing.
And yes, Ruth Tillman wrote Vivian Sinclair. So the other game that we're launching at this Gen Con is Fall of Delta Green. Both Kat and I love Delta Green because it has all those mythos elements, all the horror, but it's really, really personal. It really affects the core of your humanity from the beginning, not only because of the mythos, but because of the terrible decisions you have to make as a character, because your agent's trying to cover stuff up, and you might have a choice between killing somebody innocent or allowing something terrible to happen. And Fall of Delta Green is the 1960s setting for Delta Green before the organisation kind of was no longer an official government organisation. So there's a kind of degree of 1960s cockiness about it. It features all the things you'd hope. It's Vietnam, Vegas, psychedelic drugs, the music, and this I would say is our best looking book to date. It is just a wonderfully put together and beautiful piece of work, created by Kenneth Hite, who created Trail of Cthulhu, which is I suppose our flagship game, and has been for many years. And he also loves Delta Green and has written for it for a long time. And it's about the kind of destruction of the human psyche in the face of horror, but not just your humanity in terms of what the mythos has, the effect the mythos has on you, but the effect of your bonds with your family. If you can stop kind of mental degradation by wearing away at your bond with one of your loved ones and replacing it with Delta Green, and in the end, that's all you've got left.
Yeah. It really shows the impact of it. Like Simon said, it's a really personal horror. Like a lot of Cthulhu mythos horror is kind of, you go out and you fight against the monsters, and it's all terrible.
You see a rubbery thing.
You see a rubbery thing, and it's terrifying. Oh, we're all scared.
Trust us, it's terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but this really looks at the impact. Just going out, dealing with these relentless horrors day after day has, like, you can't take that off when you come home and take off your hat and your coat, right? Yeah. You can't take off the impact that has on your mind, and you can't then interact, as Simon said, with your spouse or your children, right?
You take it home with you.
You take it all home with you, and it eats into your life and destroys everything you hold dear. I'm making it sound terrible, but it's really, it's really very much in the kind of H.P. Lovecraft vein, in that kind of bleak purist kind of mode of Lovecraftiana.
Yeah, I mean, I like seeing that stuff done with the mythos and stripping away a lot of the kind of superficial things that people associate with Lovecraft. That it has to be this kind of Victorian or 1920s, 1930s.
Yeah, exactly.
Feel, and the look of all the stuff has got the kind of the MK Ultra.
Yeah,
or,
exactly.
Sort of a lot of it. It's just the context for it. It's really immersive. A lot of the artwork and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
And as someone who did live through that era, the older I get and the more adult I become, and the more my problems mirror the problems that other people have had in those eras, I get more interested in playing games that are about stuff like that instead of just another, like, let me see what who the lich is this time, or this or that dragon or whatnot.
Yeah, a thing that Ken always says is that you can never make up something that's more fascinating and imaginative and interesting than the real world. So a lot of his games are incredibly well researched, and they really bring this kind of historical periods to life. So it really is like living through the 1960s, or with Trail of Cthulhu, it's like living through the 1930s. Yeah.
The other thing that he does, which he also did in Trail, was that he remystifies the mythos. So you won't recognize the horrible things that you meet. You won't go, it's a ghoul. It'll be different. There'll be a slant on it, and the book describes the creatures in forms of evidence of stuff. So weird things that you've seen or heard. So it doesn't give you a clear picture, an objective picture of what that thing is. It tells you its effects on the surroundings and on the human mind, and gives you different options. So if you play in 2 Fall of Delta Green games, you won't have the same experience.
My favorite aspect of Delta Green is actually the green boxes. The
Yeah.
the storage units. Are you familiar with those?
Not those, no.
So you can find a storage, like basically a storage locker close
Okay.
to where you are, and there's they actually have an online generator as well for green boxes where it randomly generates what's inside.
Oh, neat.
And so you're like, oh, well, what's in the storage unit? And it's like, well, there's some cool guns, and then there's a box that says don't open, and it has hieroglyphics on it, and there's a sarcophagus, and you're like, what?
Drink the juice from the sarcophagus.
Yeah, and I'm definitely the player. I get a hard time about this all the time. I'm the player that's like, oh, let's open it.
Yeah, I'm that person too.
Yeah, and I have
exactly.
friends that are, they had a very, very long Call of Cthulhu game that I came in occasionally, and every time I came in, they were like, don't touch that. Stop doing things. And I was like, but there's a lever. Like, why would it be here if not to... So they're very wary of me when they play with me, and and especially when we do Delta Green, I'm like, I'm just going to keep reading this, right? And put on
But
that
it's
mask.
like Chekhov's storage unit, right?
Yeah,
If you don't want it opened, you shouldn't put it in the thing, right?
Right?
And there's a lovely mechanic in Gumshoe that fits in perfectly with that, which kind of stops a lot of unnecessary planning, and that's called preparedness.
I love preparedness.
So instead of saying,
Someone say, okay.
say in one of my games, someone wanted to have already hidden, stashed away a flamethrower. Okay, and I said that doesn't sound plausible. He said, well, I'll roll preparedness. I said that sounds really, really unlikely and difficult. So because it's Knights Black Agents and you're kind of allowed to look at the real world, he and it was in Sao Paulo. He Googled for a flamethrower, and they're just available by mail order for $200 because they use them to destroy vegetation.
The forest.
So I
suppose,
said, well, yeah, okay. If you could have just bought one yesterday, then on your difficulty is 3, which is like really easy.
Yeah.
And preparedness stops people going, oh, what should we pack? And for a green box, that's exactly what you can do. You open the green box. You might say, there's the hieroglyph box, but you could say, well, tell me what else is in there. Choose 2 things that are in there, and it saves you going shopping. Nothing wrong with shopping. But
Yeah. Did you want to
just
talk
so
a bit
happy.
more about Knights Black Agents? Because I don't
Yeah.
think we've mentioned
Knights
that yet.
Black Agents. Okay, so we all love agents and we all love vampires. Well, or hate vampires, depending. In this game, you hate vampires.
complicated.
No sparkly
Exactly.
vampires.
It's like Facebook
no
status.
playing vampires. Vampires are a horror to be destroyed.
Yeah.
Now, you are really, really badass agents. In any normal circumstance at all, you are just going to competently Jason Bourne your way through anything. Except you meet vampires. And almost every single time, they will screw you over to start with. But you get just a little bit of information about them. Maybe when you hit them with your baton, you actually did a bit of damage. Whereas when you were shooting them, it didn't make any difference at all. You take that information away, and you then use that to get into more thrilling trouble. And it just cycles up and up, and you move through a thing called the Conspiramid, which is one of my favourite tools for designing a campaign. So at the bottom of the Conspiramid, you've got all the kind of lowly operatives of the conspiracy, and then you've got the people in charge of them, and in charge of them all the way up to whatever the horror, the vampiric horror is at the top. Then you turn it sideways, and that's how you play through the campaign. You see, it's just so clever.
Yeah.
And as with Fall of Delta Green, the vampires in Knights Black Agents, you, the GM, gets to decide what the vampires are. They could be aliens, they could be traditional kind of Dracula type vampires, but every single one is different. So I invented my vampires at the beginning of the game. I said, right, well, you finished your characters. The only other thing I'd like you to tell me, just write down what your blood type is. Don't worry about it, just write down what your blood type is. And they were like,
Am I the delicious corn?
yeah. So yes, they had to.
Unrelated to the game.
Yeah, and two of them were delicious. That's what happened. So it's a thrilling, fun game. It's got more crunchy elements than other Gumshoe games. So you can do stuff like auto fire and grabbing someone and using him as a shield. Everything you've seen in a Jason Bourne movie, beating someone to death with a magazine, all that stuff.
Yeah, it's very fast-paced and
Yeah.
cinematic.
And it has one mechanic, I can't remember the name of it, but it's very fun, where it's similar to Preparedness, but it's with not bonds, but like contacts.
oh, this is one of the best things about the game. I've stolen it for 13th Age, actually. You should steal this for any game where you're in a city or you're going around and seeing NPCs. You build a network of contacts and you put points in them. And the players can kind of invent who their contacts are. So if you needed a drug dealer or a gun dealer or a diplomat or a priest or whatever, you put points in them and then you get them to do stuff for you. But it's normally stuff they don't particularly want to do. And that burns through their points. And when you can refresh the points, but when they hit naught, they're probably going to betray you or something bad's going to happen. And there's an interesting choice between, do I put points into building my character and making them a more badass character, or do I put points into contacts and network to make myself more influential? And when I go to a city, people are going to like me or respect me, or can I just be better at shooting and killing things? And both are valid options.
Yeah.
The system allows for, because I think people tend to prefer to play one or the other. You know, you kind of, often people will play a face kind of character who's all about talking, and the, like you said earlier, like the actual role play and the interaction is what really excites them about role playing, and with the contacts and the network, you can really build that kind of character and be like, oh yeah, I know a woman in that city. Yeah, I'm going to get in touch with my friend Alicia. She'll sort us out. You know, she'll put us up in a safe house, and you can really. And again, it kind of allows you to get more into the personal aspect of your character. You're sure they're a super badass secret agent, but they're also a human who has these kind of contacts and these relationships with these people.
So you get more role playing if that's the kind of character you want. You get to role play with NPCs. If you want to kill NPCs, you get to shoot.
Yeah.
Both valid choices.
And it, you know, like Delta Green, it's a similar thing where it's you can be sort of a more, I mean, you know, you're a badass spy, but it's a more real world person dealing with a very otherworldly, you know, twist, as it were. And I love that where it's, I mean, I do enjoy D&D and fantasy games, but I also just like the idea of like, oh, I'm just, you know, a plucky FBI agent who happened to see, you know, a young Shoggoth one day.
Yeah.
I was like, oh.
And I've never been the same.
I can't look at mirrors anymore.
Is there any, the players never become vampires themselves? Do they?
No.
If they do, they're out of the game.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's
I
just
think
that's
that's
not an option.
Absolutely
Yeah.
forbidden to do that.
Because
Not
the
allowed.
minute you allow that,
It becomes vampire.
Yeah,
right?
it
just
becomes
becomes
something
vampire
else.
in the game.
Yeah. There's enough games where you're nice to vampires.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about Dracula, Johnson?
Yeah. So for Night's Black Agents, I mean,
so
when
exciting.
you
actually
talk
do know about this one.
when you talk about vampires, right? There is one name we've already mentioned that jumps into everyone's mind when you talk about vampires, and that's Dracula. So the second we launched Night's Black Agents, people were like, how can I kill Dracula? How can I kill Dracula? How can I kill Dracula? And we're like, well, you know, you can do your own campaign. You can put
Practice.
Dracula at the top of your conspiramid. And then we went away and we thought about it and we were like, yeah, you should be able to kill Dracula in this game. So we did a Kickstarter for what we call the Dracula Dossier. Now, the Dracula Dossier is basically Dracula the novel. But it takes the premise that that's an edited, redacted version of real events that actually happened when MI6, or Naval Intelligence as they were at the time, sent a team of specialists to Transylvania to kill Dracula, right? So they, Naval Intelligence redacted 2 characters out of the book. We've added those back in. And we've also added back in scenes that were redacted from the book that revealed too much about Dracula's actual intentions or his locations or things like that. So you basically, when you start playing the Dracula Dossier, you hand your players a version of the Dracula novel that has these 2 added characters back in and all of these extra scenes. It
It's
has
got, like,
also
notes in it,
been annotated
Yeah.
by 3 different generations of MI6 analysts.
Oh, I love the stuff like that.
Because
Yeah.
every now and again, some bright spark goes through the vaults at MI6 and goes, oh, you know what? We tried to recruit Vampire to fight, or Dracula to fight the Turks, and that didn't work very well, but I bet we could get him in to fight Hitler. Yeah, let's try and recruit Dracula to fight Hitler. That did not go well. Then some bright spark had the idea of trying to recruit Dracula in to defeat Al-Qaeda. Also not
I'll be
so
interested this
well.
time.
So ultimately, you as the players are just trying to trying to hunt down and eventually kill Dracula,
Yeah.
using the annotations made by these 3 generations of MI6 analysts in the Dracula Unredacted. We've then also got an enormous book called the Director's Handbook, which gives the director, the person who's running the game, everything they need to, depending on where the players look in this Dracula novel, they have all of the detail on the locations, they have floor plans, they have NPCs, they have cities, they have people who they're going to encounter. It allows you to choose whether, if they meet an NPC in a particular city, whether they're a complete innocent, whether they're kind of in league with Dracula, or whether they're like fully turned and an asset of Dracula. So you can, depending on where you meet people in your game, they can be any one of those 3, and the players never know at any point who is in league with Dracula and who isn't. So it's an epic campaign. It's as well as the 2 core books, the Dracula Unredacted and the Director's Handbook. We've also got a collection of adventures for it. We've got a field manual that tells you all about this rogue element within MI6 that keeps trying to recruit Dracula against everyone's better judgment. And we've also got a little book called The Thrill of Dracula, which basically looks at Dracula throughout pop culture. So in all of the films, all of the books, everything that's ever been produced about Dracula, Ken Hite has reviewed and basically told you how you can use this in your version of your Dracula game.
So that was interesting research, sitting down and watching every single one of these films.
Every Dracula film ever,
And then when you're creating something like that, that's based on, you know, a pre-done IP, I mean, how different is that from, in the creation process, from when you've got something that you're building from the ground up?
Well, I think, obviously Dracula is public domain.
Right.
And so we don't have a lot of the restraints that you would that you'd get from other licensed properties. So a good example of that is Fall of Delta Green. Now the Delta Green partnership are fiercely protective of their intellectual property. They have a real vision for how it has to be. So when you work with them, you need to ensure that they trust you, that you are providing them with the right kind of creators who they believe can do a good job, but also you need your own space. So the reason that it's not set today is because we wanted our own space to work in, to complement and build on what they had done. So the approvals process for that was actually very straightforward. I mean, I imagine people who are doing Star Trek and Star Wars games have got real constraints. But again, because Kenneth Hite wrote it, and he also wrote for the Delta Green, it made it a lot easier, and it was actually very, very smooth. And they're very, very happy with it. But with Dracula, there are so many takes on Dracula. As the Thrill of Dracula just shows there's so many different ways of doing things. And it wasn't a huge creative.
I think the key, because I worked very closely with Ken and Gareth Ryder Hanrahan, who was also really, really involved in the creation of it. So I was on a kind of a Skype chat with them constantly, and so I was able to see the back and forth between them. I think the key difficulty, I guess, they had was that Dracula, the novel, is so dense. It's so very, very dense, and there are so many references. So you would have to make sure that if the novel said such a thing happened on the 30th of April, 1894, that you were making sure that anywhere you referenced that particular element, whether it was people who were in that, or the location itself, or like items that they might have found there, you had to tie that back into all of that. So it's the index actually tells you the kind of the difficulty of it, because it is indexed, like there are 20 or 30 pages of indices in it, because everything had to be meticulously cross-referenced to make sure that it held with the original novel. So I think that was the big difference really between doing something like that where you're working with effectively a really existing piece of work versus doing something like Fall of Delta Green, which is, while you're working with a licensed property, you still have a lot of creative freedom to go, I've decided this thing is going to happen on this day. So, and you only have to remember that one instance of it rather than having a mental list from the book of when all of that happens.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who likes alternate history a lot, I feel like that spending the time on that element of the craft of it is critical.
Absolutely,
I mean,
absolutely.
that's what puts
For the
Tim Powers
integrity of the
above somebody
world,
else,
yeah.
you know, or is that you're like, oh, okay, this is I can suspend my disbelief about the supernatural elements because the historicity of it is just so strong, you know.
Yeah.
It is possible we got a little bit over obsessed with perfection on that project by making sure absolutely everything was linked up perfectly, and they both kind of devolved into this thinking of Dracula world and finding amazing coincidences everywhere and putting them all in. So there are all sorts of, like a million Easter eggs across the whole thing. And Kat and I spent a long time creating these amazing packets of facsimile documents that it was one of the kind of, we're super excited about our Kickstarter, let's give everyone facsimile documents. So we hand-aged things and had maps produced and was slicing things up and making telegrams. And it was, the end result of that was so exciting. It was a difficult process, but the few people that got those, their game must have been enhanced amazing.
Yeah, a lot of people doing that, sometimes it ends up being very messy, you know, and then when they're trying to pursue this like look of like, oh, this could have come from this world, you know, these typewritten documents and those other things.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need a really strong art direction to really hold that all together. Because otherwise you get this book, it's like, wow, this is beautiful to look at, and it's fun to sit in bed late at night and read, but when I need to look something up, I can't find anything, you know, so.
Dean
Engelhardt, who's based in Australia, did the visual look of the Hawkins papers, which is this collection of prop documents. And that was actually part of the problem. We had this idea that we would commission him to create these facsimile documents that dealt with the different time periods that the novel and the game cover, which are the 1890s, the 1940s, 1970s, and the current day. So it was a kind of a folder of documents that you might be handed out of a dusty archive, right? And these are, you know, bonus additions to the clues in the Director's Handbook and Dracula Unredacted. But Dean Engelhardt did such an incredible job on the visuals that when we saw it, we were like, oh, we can't really just print these. You know, we actually need to, because he had like little bits of sellotape on them and tears in them and textures in them. And we were like, oh, I guess we're going to have to replicate these physically then. So yeah, we were hand scrunching and hand I think I still have the scars from all the baking of paper we did and tea staining and ink dripping for blood. And
I love stuff like that.
yeah, it looks incredible. It looks really fantastic. The end result is gorgeous, but oh my gosh, would we never do that again?
But Dean has also been working on our Kickstarter project, the Yellow King.
Oh yeah.
RPG, which it's Robin's creation, but it includes incredible art as well. It's our most ambitious Kickstarter to date in terms of production values, because we, in the past couple of years, have concentrated a lot more on making our books beautiful objects in themselves. Obviously, Fall of Delta Green is an example of that. Yeah. The Yellow King uses a much simpler version of Gumshoe, which is called the Quick Shock. And so combats happen where you have a combat. They just happen in, each player says what they want to happen. Dice are rolled, and then there's a result. But you haven't got hit points, you haven't got stability. You get given a card which gives you some kind of horrible thing that's happened to you as a result of contact with one of these creatures. And it's really easy to play, particularly for people who like the literary side of things but aren't that interested in it being crunchy. But Kat can talk a lot more about where we are with that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I love about it that Simon mentioned is that I think in a lot of combat systems in games, you know, you just kind of charge in with your axe and you're like, well, I'm just charging in with my axe and trying to hit it. Whereas the quick shock system, and particularly as it's tweaked in the Yellow King, says, no, but what are you actually trying to do, right? If there is like a person here that you're trying to interact with, what is your goal? Are you trying to render them unconscious? Are you actually trying to kill them? Are you just trying to dissuade them from going down this alleyway? You know, or are you actually trying to persuade them to do something other than what they're doing? So it allows you a lot more options in combat. It's not just charging in with a weapon. It's kind of going, what is your goal in this situation?
Yeah.
So yeah, as Simon mentioned, it's quite different. It's got a very different form factor to our usual books in that it's a 4-book slipcase set. So it's going to look really great,
nice,
but
yeah.
also
So the magic word, slipcase.
we haven't
Yeah.
done a slipcase before,
Yeah.
so I'm very excited about it.
And so that's on Kickstarter right now.
So it has been kickstarted and it's available for pre-order, and we're putting the finishing touches to the layout right now. So we're hoping to have that out by the end of the year.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
But we haven't said it will be out by the end of the year. The Kickstarter gives us a little bit more leeway.
Yeah. Not
You
official.
did tell them all.
She didn't say that. She didn't say that.
You know, I hear that from a lot of other developers here that like when there's people show up to Gen Con and they're like, this book is out? And they're like, we did it.
Yeah.
This was the impetus to really get us, you know,
Yeah.
to just make it under the wire.
Yeah.
And
We
it's
Yeah.
learn
thrilling.
every time. Every time we do a
Yeah.
Kickstarter, we do a bit better. And because Robin Laws was involved in this one, it's by the numbers. It's absolutely everything is being done. Everybody is being wrangled perfectly. It's a good job he's not a publisher.
So for those at home who are just learning about all of this now,
Yeah.
where can they go to get every single one of these amazing games?
So they can go to www.pelgranepress.com. So that's PELGRANEPRESS.com.
That should be a jingle.
Yeah, you've composed a jingle.
Good. And Yellow King is on pelgranepress.com.
Yellow King is on. Oh,
The fall of Delta
Fall
Green.
of Delta Green.
Delta Green.
That was so
was it.
Has
perfect.
fallen.
Not as dramatic as we'd hoped.
No.
Well, thank you so much,
No problem.
This
Thank
has
you
been
so
very,
much
very
for having
exciting.
us
The
on.
voucher thing.
Kat, Simon.
Oh yeah, and we've got a special voucher code as well for people who are watching.
Voucher
that I don't know
code?
if
Oh,
we've-
yeah, good
I'm really
luck.
hoping that we've
Is
mentioned.
there's going to be linked in the chat, or?
It should be. I'm
Okay.
hoping it's been linked in the chat.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
excellent.
Getting a
yes.
thumbs up from over there
Are we
on
gonna
the
know it
link
too,
in the
though?
chat.
Gosh,
So
Yeah,
yeah,
would
so
like
if people use the voucher code GenCon10PC in our web store, they'll get 10% off. So that's GenCon10PC in
Excellent.
our web store.
Oh, that's amazing.
So, I'm Alquin Gersh. You can also see me on my own Twitch channel, Different Elves. And tonight we have a game,
We do.
Yeah.
Theogony of Kairos.
Maze Arcana's Theogony of Kairos, live tonight. So please check that out. That's on this channel as well, I think, isn't it? Official Gen Con. Twitch.
Yeah.
Okay.
And and eventually those folks will be coming to my home to play Hillfolk. I've been
Yes.
trying
Oh,
to demand it of them for.
Oh,
great.
and are we going to be able to watch that?
Well, okay, so no, because I want to do a home game first. But I think Hillfolk and a lot of y'all's games really are perfect for Twitch.
We think so too.
yeah.
We
Yeah.
think so
They're
too, and we're
just-
really keen for people to start playing them on Twitch.
So
They're-
so
Let's
interesting.
talk about that.
Because it's just tokens.
Let's talk. Let's exchange cards. Have your people call our people.
Yeah.
I'll just do it. Thank you both so much for coming.
No, thank you so
Pleasure.
much for
Yeah,
having
thank
us.
you.
It's been a wonderful chat. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you would like to introduce yourselves one more time to the audience.
Oh, yeah. So I'm Kat Tobin. I'm the co-owner and managing director of Pelgrane Press.
And I'm Simon Rogers, director and co-owner of Pelgrane Press.
And we're Alquin and Ash, talking about games
Yeah.
and having books fall over. That's
Yeah.
cool.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you all
Thank
so
you.
much.